Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to another edition of InFocus, a weekly program that takes a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Today we are taking a closer look at an important shift in national development, the transition from the Citizen Security Secretariat to a National Secretariat which has its concentration focused on human security and well-being. The impending change signals a move beyond the traditional approaches to safety, placing greater focus on people, communities, and factors such as social support and economic opportunity to health and well-being. Here with us today to talk a bit about the change and the way it will impact the communities across the country and what role citizens can play to this new approach is Eartha Carey, who is the chairperson of the task force for the National Security Secretariat that will be transitioned to this new human focus on human and well-being and human security, very important. And also we have the program director, and that will be Mr. Hance Richards. Stay with us for InFocus as we examine the shift to human security and well-being.
We established a Citizen Security Secretariat integrating enforcement with social services and community engagement. We are now transforming it into the National Secretariat for Human Security and Well-being. It cannot just be citizens who we take care of alone, but anybody who comes to our shores, we have to determine that their security is also our priority. Hence, human security and well-being.
Welcome back to InFocus, and joining me now, as mentioned, is Eartha Carey. Ms. Carey, you've been on the program before, so welcome back to you.
Thank you for the welcome.
And we have, for the very first time, Mr. Hance Richards. And of course, you work very closely with Mr. Richards. Mr. Richards, welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon to the viewing and listening audience. I'm looking forward for the conversation.
All right, so let's jump right into it now. The term citizen security as a government agency was first introduced by the Prime Minister, formally, of course, back in 2023, August, when we had the launch of the Citizen Security Secretariat. Mm-hmm. For those who may not be sure, tell us a bit about the concept of those who still don't understand, the concept of citizen security.
Yes, thank you for that question, and it's a great question so we can inform persons about exactly what's the difference between citizen security and national security, because we've been getting that question, what do you mean by citizen security? But first let me say that since the Prime Minister had decided to take the approach on how we can curb crime and violence as a public health perspective, we thought it was best to identify that citizen and national is two different concepts. And the reason for that is because we wanted to look at it from more of a public health perspective versus just a regular perspective saying that it's about crime only. It's not. So it's really about placing people, right, and not just crime control. It's about placing people at the forefront and seeing how we can address issues that they are currently facing. And this will go deep into family homes. This will go deep into what persons would have probably been looking at from a tender age. And out of this, I must say that we were able to develop the concept, of course, because when we received the results back from a report, and my colleague can also assist me, where we did a USAID study, and out of that would have surfaced so many issues that we were not aware that is affecting citizens, people, human, of how we can start looking at it from a different perspective. So that's really the concept of citizen versus national security.
Right. Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Richards?
Yeah, in addition to what Ms. Carey would have mentioned, citizen security was focused on dealing with the root causes of crime and violence rather than the being reactive to the situation or the symptoms. All right. So once the intention was to find what the root causes were. This came in from the public health approach. Intention came from the first symposium of crime and violence as a public health issue in Trinidad in 2023. But prior to that, there was a Needham's declaration in 2023, also in October in Barbados. And one of the major points from that declaration, the Needham declaration, was that we need to start looking at crime and violence as a public health emergency. And so having amalgamate those two, the Prime Minister thought it was important for us now to start up and running in terms of, as it relates to finding the root causes that are affecting crime and violence. So we're kind of moving away from the punitive in its entirety and find the root cause and not necessarily treat the symptoms, which after there's a homicide, and in public health we would say event, after there's an event then we go to the crime scene rather than trying to prevent the event. And that's what the Citizen Security Secretariat and the research is all about.
Right. And of course, tackling crime from a public health perspective, it took the involvement of all parties. And when I say parties, I'm not speaking about anything political, but I'm speaking about everyone in St. Kitts and Nevis who has a stake in the game, which is all of us.
Correct, yes. We had to look at it from a more holistic approach, as we would say in layman terms, all hands on deck, because I can't do it alone, you can't do it alone, the Prime Minister can't do it alone, the government on a whole cannot do it alone. It takes the input from everybody, because everybody has their own issues, and at the same time everyone have their own possibly solution that we can look at together as a whole. Your way might be a better way, or your way might be more effective, so then your ideas, my ideas could bring everything together so we can approach this thing, because it takes more than just a single person, right? Yes, so we have to look at it from that perspective.
And interesting enough, of course, Mr. Richards mentioned, of course, the symposium or the conference that was held in Trinidad. I think that might have been back in 2023. 2023, all right. And of course...
24 was in Guyana.
Okay, so there have been two conferences in particular.
Yes, and the third one which should be in St. Kitts.
Oh, when is that? That's
maybe June, July, thereabout.
Oh, that's this year?
Yeah.
Okay, well, breaking news right here. So, the concept of it worked for St. Kitts and Nevis, and I want to talk a bit about the results of that. But I also want to mention, because it became a major talking point during the heads meeting, that it may not have worked for everyone. I think that's an important distinction that needs to be made, and part of it might have to do with the fact that, you know, cultures are different.
Yes.
People are different. Political will is different, of course, but the Prime Minister has been all in. And we've had the results that we've seen, which we're going to talk about. But before we get there, talk to us a bit about the whole concept of from a public health perspective in addressing crime.
All right. So first you need to know why we choose crime and violence as a public health issue. One, because there is an increase in prevalence, and then you have rapid increase in prevalence incidents, and then you have the cost and burden, how much it costs. For the three categories of events. Remember I said a shooting, in public health we consider it event. So we have the non-fatal event, which is someone who was shot but would have been taken in the care of the emergency care. All being well, they would have been released from the hospital. Two, you have fatal. Those are the persons who unfortunately pass away from the damages from the firearm. And three, we have non-fatal. Fatal, those who would have been, there is the event, you get to the hospital, you receive emergency care, you've been warded, whether it's to surgical ward, and maybe during the period of, while you're at the ward, or even after being released, you pass, and that's the third category. So if we look at those, that's the cost and burden, and the cost is about $150,000 per non-fatal. And as you go to the different category, the cost and the cost of burden would increase. All right. I think we did a calculation yesterday, me and the admin, and we're looking about almost close to $1 billion for the past 30 years. as it relates to crime and violence in the Federation and St. Kitts and Nevis. So for us to say that because the numbers would have decreased from 2024 until now, the Prime Minister made mention that. But finances from that department, I think his Ministry of Health would have been passed on to Ministry of Education, because they would have said, I think it's about the sum of maybe 20 million. I'm not too sure. I would prefer to say, I wouldn't want to call a figure, but yeah, a bit amount of funds were passed on from one ministry to the next because of the decrease in the numbers. And then the most important thing is that it's curable and preventable. Now, in the case of what you mentioned, I need to make mention of it because some persons are saying things, and I understand because it's new. But in the case of what was said in CARICOM summit not too long ago, every country has their own way. But everywhere you apply the public health approach. Case in point, I always use this in the case of COVID-19. Why in Trinidad, why in Jamaica, why in St. Martin, why in St. Kitts, why in Anguilla, there's no more COVID? It's the same thing. If you treat it as an infectious disease, which Needham's declaration declared clearly that it must be treated as an emergent public health emergency, which boils down to an epidemic or a pandemic. UN is looking at it because of the number of countries in the Caribbean that suffer in homicide, looking at it as a pandemic, even though it's not transmitted, but it's transmitted through immigration via gangs, but not necessarily from one person to the next. However, if based on a country's resources and a country's situation, just like how if you cheat every Caribbean country the way you cheated COVID, I guarantee you 100% like clockwork, that the countries would reduce, the crime rate would reduce dramatically, yes. There would be a vast decrease because you apply the principles, and as long as the principles, the epidemiological principles are applied in any infectious disease or any pandemic, any epidemic, it's always going to work. Or in this case, we will still have Ebola, we still have chikungunya, yellow fever, all these things will still be going on. And they're not, because they were treated as such. And so we decided, I was given the task to be the architect, and that's how I approach it, and it's going to work.
Let me come back to something that you said earlier. You quoted some figures, and I appreciate that you don't have the numbers in front of you. But you said roughly $1 billion has been saved.
Been spent for the past 30 years. Yes.
But that $1 billion, is that direct to the treatment in the health sector? Okay,
so we're working on the cost and burden, but I use the 150,000 as a ballpark figure. US for every victim, whether fatal or non-fatal. But the figure is based on, again, like I said, the three categories. If it's a fatal, that's mean you have to include people like the MAG, the police moving. I remember working in Delta. I said this morning in a presentation where we have to take the body from the hospital to the morgue, bring it back for it to be looked at from a pathological point of view, dealing with the pathologist, and then take it back to the morgue.
Right.
Then when it's time for the funeral, because of the sensitivity of the homicide, you have to be secured by law enforcement to the church, to the burial ground. And you still have to have law enforcement around the community protecting it based on the sensitivity of the homicide. So all those coming in place to make the cost and burden of crime and violence.
Right, I wanted to make that distinction because it's not just the treatment in terms of the health care, but overall, because there are a lot of persons who fail to recognize that, of course, there's a lot more that goes into it. And of course, you're talking about families, because that's not even counted. Some families may even have to see a psychologist, and there's trauma, and
I was getting to that. One of the biggest issues we have is that we're not treating crime and violence as a medical issue or a health issue. And because of that, persons leave with trauma, like you say. If somebody passes, let's say I'm Miss Carey's brother, I get shot. Miss Carey's a co-victim. You live in the environment, you're also a co-victim because you're a member of a family or the community in which I reside. And then you're not treated. They will leave me from the hospital, and let's assume you get a cardiac arrest, you get a heart attack. Persons, they will give you the prescription of the do's and the don'ts, inclusive of the medication. In the case of a shooting, there's no prescription. They want you to leave, you go, and the only thing on your mind is retaliation. And so that's why most of the homicides or the events are retaliatory, because you go back without being treated with the trauma, you and your family. And so now in the National Secretariat for Human Security and Well-being, the move now is to start treating persons from a mental health point of view, because most of the issues are traumatic from the crime and violence issues that we're facing. In addition, I was as I was speaking about the cost and burden, I should have mentioned that there are about 15 persons, give and take, who are incapacitated, and so the government, or Social Security specifically, have to take care of their social services of their children or their parents, because they're no longer able to work, and someone has to carry the burden. And that's where, again, the government has to spend to make sure that the children are okay. So the cost and burden of one simple shooting, it's enormous. And if you multiply it by 30, by 10, by 12 a year, and then 30, it's a great deal. It's almost 12 of our national budgets. So it's a serious issue.
Yes. And it also doesn't cover the loss of income that person also might have made to the family as well. Too.
Correct.
So really and truly, can you think about where St. Kitts and Nevis could have been if that money is in terms of development?
Metropolis.
Absolutely. So, based on the results that you mentioned, and the Prime Minister would have referred to it in the clip that we would have just heard, an 80% decrease in homicides last year. Now, what would you say has really, would you attribute to, and I know you touched on it some, but attribute the success of this approach to?
Okay, so when we look at the data show that 76% of, based on the survey that I would have done, 76% of the persons in the population are behind the approach. All right, that's even pretty close to 80%. And then you have Elevate.
And when you say the approach, you're talking about
the public health approach.
Right.
Again, to crime and violence.
Yes. And that public buy-in is important.
Yes,
it's
pretty important.
Very much.
And so, and then you have Elevate. Obviously, you have the police still doing their do. The law enforcement, the justice arm of the country is also doing their do.
Correct.
You have the family counseling. You have the mental health aspect. So it's because public health is not a one size fits all, as Ms. Carey always say. It's an amalgamation of so many different. And so the Secretariat is different to the task force. So the task force is a higher level aspect of the approach, and that's where they make the decision, and that has members from almost every ministry, whether it's a PS, National Security Advisors, or in the case of Chamber of Industry and Commerce, you have manufacturers there. So it's different players and stakeholders are in that group, which you call, like I say, the task force, and that's where the greater decisions are made and then passed on to the Secretariat. So because it's a holistic approach, it's easier to deal with than if it's just police and law enforcement and justice. Because of course, you see, the AG spoke about the length of time between it takes for one case to be treated, and within that period, you have so many persons who are traumatized that we're just going to continue to have the events happening, or for somebody, let's say somebody just came on, so events again is referred to a shooting. So you have persons who are still going to retaliate because they're not taken care of while we're waiting on a case. It could be the witness, it could be an ex-family member, it could be anybody. And so while we're waiting for these cases, homicides continue to occur. So if we start cheating the things that are leading towards the homicide, then obviously the numbers are going to reduce. So it's a amalgamation of so many different things.
And it's almost as if you are reliving the trauma every time there's you have to go to the court, because most of the times, unfortunately, a case is called but it's not heard, and so it gets delayed, as Mr. Richards was referring to, the AG. It gets delayed, it gets put back. So it's almost every time the case is coming up, family members might go to the court because, of course, they're interested in justice, but then it gets put off, and so it just brings back up that raw emotion that you had over and over and over again.
And if you want to look at it another way, there are so many ways. After we know, conceptualize what citizen security really is, there are so many ways that we can also look at treating it. For example, like you have a wound. If you want the wound to get better, won't you clean it from the inside versus just putting on the plaster on it? So that is what we're really here for, to go deep down into what the problems that are affecting society today when it comes to crime and violence. So we have, based on the information we receive, based on the public's response, based on stakeholders' involvement and stuff like that, we were able to even look at it from a much broader aspect of when we actually started. So there's so many things for each survey results that we get when Mr. Richards goes out into the public or do presentation. Each time we go out and get new information, there's always something there to think about that we did not cover. So it's like it's growing accordingly as we move along.
So let's talk a bit about the factors that, Ms. Carey, you touched on it a bit in your opening, that would have influenced the change and the focus from Citizen Security Secretariat to focusing more so on human security and well-being?
Since the conceptualization of the Secretariat, right, I would say human security, to put it widely. This is an area that Hance really takes care of, right? But so I'll let him answer, then I'll piggyback off of him, because it's his, and I don't want to go too far beyond him. This is Hance's area.
So basically the move is to improve the overall quality of life, with not just about security, but prevention, safety in terms of your health, your stability, in well-being, in terms of finances and otherwise, and create other opportunities for you outside the life of crime. So that's basically, and then one of the issues that was mentioned in the task force was, because we had citizen security and we have a broad number of a good number, and then the scope is wide. You have so many different foreign nationals here, and so rather than saying citizen security, you want to also involve the other nationals, and so thought it was necessary to change from citizen to national. So because if you look at the homicide number, you also had foreign nationals who would have suffered the same fate, and so they need the same treatment, that because we have to look in the same root cause and give them the same treatment that a citizen would have received, and so all of that would have caused the need for the change.
Because a crime committed against someone who was born in St. Kitts and Nevis is no different from a crime who is committed from somebody who is from the region or outside of the region. And so that's very important for that distinction.
Yes.
So,
and also, just before you move on, remember, if we are saying we are paradise, we are peaceful, and we have persons entering the country on a daily basis all day long, we don't want persons to feel as if, okay, I'm not a citizen of St. Kitts, I'm considered a human. So of course the change was necessary to say human, because it incorporates everyone entering our shows at the same time. Of course, we want the good reviews when they leave St. Kitts, or even while they're in St. Kitts. We want them to be safe, feel safe, enter into communities, enter 4th Street, wherever they want to trod, and say that they feel safe walking through the country. So that the change from citizen to human, it incorporates everything and everyone at the same time.
has that been embraced? I appreciate it's still new, but of course on the task force level, the administrative level, has that change really been embraced?
I will say yes. Yes, it has definitely, because again, it opens up so much more. And as I mentioned previously, as we go on and we get new information, we are seeing areas that we have not even touched. But because of the information that we are receiving, we are saying, okay, now we have to move over into here for, we have the counseling part of it. We have to look at how we can lead these future leaders into looking at how they can uplift the communities. So, because it's not out there as yet, but from our end on the inside, it has been well received thus far, but it's now just for us to go back and see what areas we need to add, take away, or enhance.
Tell us a bit about this task force, Ms. Carey, and who sits on the task force, not necessarily names per se, but in terms of representation.
Sure. Currently, as my colleague mentioned, we have PSs from the various ministries across the country, and when we say across the country, we speak both of St. Kitts and Nevis, because again, we want to make everyone inclusive. And currently we have persons sitting on the task force from National Security, where we have representation of what's for the police force. We have education, we have health, we have youth development. We also have representation from the Christian councils. We have the UN. We also have what's I'm missing? We have someone from Elevate. We have the Prime Minister's office. We have pretty much everyone at this time. Also, what I may say, even though they're not currently sitting on the task force, it does not mean that we're not welcoming ideas from outside, because some persons, they share ideas, but they doesn't necessarily want to sit on the task force. But currently, those who I mentioned are who we currently have serving on the task force.
Okay, and so of course we know that budget was last year. It was debated and approved by the National Parliament in 2025, December, and that funds the government's priorities for 2026. Tell us a bit about any sort of increased support that would have been given to help to streamline, to enhance the services that has been provided by the Secretariat, and now that it's transitioning to something even more.
Yes, I must proudly say that we were able to receive 3 approved personnel positions: the program director, an administrative assistant, and the public relation officer. So those are, that in itself is a very big help, because it may look easy on the outside, but trust me, with the coordination, the planning, the follow-up phone calls, the typing, it is a lot. Getting information, doing the research, going out into the communities, that also takes a lot of effort from persons. And while we have persons on the inside that can assist, having these 3 main posts that were created, it also takes a little bit off of some of us who are already existing, especially the admin portion of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was actually going to say, being in public relations certainly that's very important.
Yes, that's very
because
important.
You've been on the forefront, you've been out there.
Yes.
So more or less what you do, although you present the statistics, and of course you're the program director as we established, while you do the engagements with stakeholders, with groups, etc., you also more or less do some public relations yourself. That's why you're here.
Yes.
So having someone dedicated to that, it helps to free up, to focus your role more.
Certainly. So, like I say, it's a good idea. I'm happy that everything is up and running so that we could continue the work. All right, and so I'm looking forward to the continued support from the community. I must say kudos to the community, because most of the times when I go to do surveys, whether it's at schools and parents at meetings, and whether it's St. Kitts and Nevis, short notice or long notice, the public most of the time is very cooperative, and I'm very grateful for their assistance. I just wanted to echo that sentiment.
Yes.
And that is reflected in the stat that you mentioned.
Yes,
you said that
100%.
almost 80%.
76% supported the approaches.
Yeah, and for us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, because we know the challenges of having surveys done, we know the challenges of the census. There are some persons who just run away from it. So to see that the public response by having sharing information for a survey, that it is so enhanced that at 70%, that's really impressive. What would you attribute that to?
Well, because like I said, public health is all about finding the root cause, and we found the root cause from the response that we got from USAID, which were the children, and they have all the answers. So and then obviously they have parents and they have guardians. So we went to the parents and the guardians. So we basically covering the root causes, and they gave you the answers that you wanted, and it allowed you to expand your research. And so that's where I think it all happened. And then you also did research. You covered other members of the community, persons who are business, persons who are incarcerated and are now rehabilitated. And so, like I say, you just keep going to different people, and you explain to them and be honest with them. It's not about trying to get you in any issue. There's nothing personal and private from the conversation. It's just that there's a problem and there's an epidemic, and we need to fight it. And when I explain that to the public, the response is pretty good. I must say, actually, I think it was Sadler's and Virtuals, Basti. The responses were pretty good. Pretty good. The parents basically gave, some cases I wanted only 50 responses, and I got more than 50 in some cases. So I can't complain at all. So again, let me echo the sentiment of thank you to the community.
Okay.
And that's where the answers are, That's where the answers are, because we can't stay behind the walls or sit in the tree and get the answers. It takes us going out into communities, communities that I've never been in. That's where the answers are, I remember when I went into a particular community, don't know anything about that community, much less the persons. And it was just while walking there, just started to read the body languages of persons and listen to the lingo. And I actually sat, and I would always use this as an example. It's having that personal approach, meaning meet them where they are. I knew nothing about them, but as I was walking towards them, I kept what the goal and the objective was in mind. And as I approached them, I just sat down quietly. Of course, I said good afternoon or good morning. And I sat down there and I just observed. Some looked at me, why is she here? Stuff like that, which was okay. It was scary a little bit because, again, it's a neighborhood I'm not familiar with, but because that's where the answers are, we have to find a way and know how to approach these persons if we want these answers. So you sit down, you have that conversation, and it's very important, and that's why Hance would always say that, we thank the public greatly, because what's important after we make that initial connection, one of the main things that's important is the follow-up.
Yes.
Follow-up is very important. It's just like you're applying for a job. you send the resume. Don't just leave the resume there because there are 10,000 persons going in after you with resumes and stuff like that. If you're interested in getting that job, what do? You make it your business and you follow up. So if we want consistent results, what do? We follow up, and of course we try to see what is realistically in front of us that we can fix, almost immediately, and then we continue work on what we need to achieve down the road for longevity and continuity, of course, which is very important.
And that lends to the credibility of the work and the study that is being done, because of course, unfortunately, when it comes to government, there are some persons who feel that things often get put on the back burner. You're going to have a talk shop. I remember even CARICOM, the summit that was held, most persons felt that it was going to be a talk shop, but of course, the outcomes that has, really been publicized and communicated to persons has really started to shift the attention of some persons and feel like, okay, that's one of the words where they use historic. That this one really is going to be impactful.
Yes.
I can actually feel the impact down the line as things begin to roll out.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say the credibility is important, because if I'm talking to you and nothing happens, I don't see anything happen, then I would say, well, I just wasted my time.
So I just mentioned United Nations CARICOM, and in that conversation, in that small, the thing is, people need to understand that I would have gone to United Nations to a high level forum, and I presented our work and let it be known that to the public that their performance and participation led to the hearing, wanting to come to St. Kitts now to do a case study. St. Kitts is basically have taken the lead as it relates to the approach and the work done. And so I just want the public to know that it is because of them, they have taken their work to CARICOM, not my work, their work, and United Nations. So everything now they want to do as it relates to the public health approach and crime and violence, they look at St. Kitts and the results and the feedback they got from St. Kitts, to the point where I'm also part of the peer review, so I review their documents as it relates to the approach, again, because the community did what they were supposed to do, which allowed me now to present it to the rest of the Caribbean through the organization of CARICOM. So I just wanted to make that again very, very clear that because of their assistance, if they didn't assist me, I would not be able to get to this feat. All right, so it's important. And I know we soon take a break, but after the break, I think I wanted to present some numbers to show I wanted the Federation to understand where we came from and where we at as it relates to the numbers, and to the point where we have slowly starting to predict possibly the likelihood of another event, and we were very close to the prediction. So that's how much work we are putting in. I'm putting in this scenario, in this approach, and again, having a meeting with UN and CARICOM yesterday, even because I'm on one of their board. We told them about what we were going to do for the action plan, and they were very excited. So we have an action plan. We would just give a synopsis of it, because we're still in the preparation stage of it. So I just wanted to once again tell the public it's all because of them where we at today.
Right, and you're correct. It's at the bottom of the hour, and we're going to take our break. And that's why I mentioned to you that the conversation flows. Sometimes we take 3 breaks, sometimes we take 2, sometimes we go not at all, because it's so much to get in such limited time. But we're going to take that break right now, and we'll be hearing from the Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, again continuing an excerpt from his address at the regular meeting that we had here in St. Kitts and Nevis of CARICOM Heads, the 50th regular meeting, and it's all connected, of course. So what we are doing here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we continue to lead. Stay right there, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back.
We have approached crime and violence through a public health lens, where we brought all together, including the opposition. For once again, I stepped out and said that the issue of national security and crime and violence cannot be a political football or just a political matter. It is a national matter. And if it is a national matter, then it takes a national approach. And so our position was to bring all together: government, opposition, and the community. And as a result of that coordinated approach, with of course national security being fundamental as well, over the past year and a half, we have recorded in St. Kitts and Nevis and over 80% reduction in homicides, reaching the lowest levels in decades. And this approach has worked extremely well for St. Kitts and Nevis.
Welcome back to InFocus. We continue our discussion with Eartha Carey and Mr. Hance Richards, and they're here discussing all about the Citizen Security Secretariat and the transition from that secretariat to focusing on citizen security to more enhanced human security and well-being. Now, Mr. Richards, this is your time. Of course, I know that you have a lot of information, a lot of statistics, and it really demonstrates that this is a scientific approach. This is not based on whims and fancies and dreams, but it is science that has been proven and tested. So let's talk a bit now about this, and of course there'll be some slides that we would show on screen that persons who
very few, because I don't want to bore the
right, well, watching on television or on social media, that they'll be able to see and follow along. Let's start with the key areas now that the Secretariat has to focus on in terms of improving the well-being of citizens, and I think that there are 6 core indicators that you probably can speak to.
All right, so we're looking at safety. We're looking at the healthy aspect of it, the economical stability, mental health stability, and basically that's the ones we're looking at outside the science. Inside the science, we're looking at the epidemiological indicator. We look at the transmission indicator. We look at the program indicator, the health system indicator outcomes, and policy and governance indicator. So those are the indicators we're looking at. So for us to deal with the issue and deal with the approach that we're looking at, and for the epidemiological, it's the foundation and the transmission, because you needed to know the root causes, etc., and then you need to know how to deal with the root causes, how to not allow it to repeat itself. All right, so to prevent it. And then the transmission, how is it transformed from one person to the next? It's transformed people like, can you catch a crime? Yes, you can catch a crime. You can catch violence, sorry, not a crime, catch violence. Let me say that again. So yes, you can catch violence. Basically, children imitate, or people in general imitate what they see. And so a visual brain, you see it and your brain record it. And the more you see it in anything, like you go to drive, first time you drive, you have to press the pedals, right? And the pedals, you have to familiarize yourself with the brakes and the gas. The same thing. Even not because it's not a virus, not because it's not an issue, but it's you're catching something because you learn from that. So what you see, it's imitated. All right. So if you could reduce the imitation of what you're seeing, that's one way in which you could reduce the numbers, and it's called interrupting the transmission. All right, so we're looking at those, but I don't really want to go too deep because I just wanted to show more numbers than anything else. All right, so I wanted to go back, my bad. Okay, so this is important. So this shows the relations, the comparison between 2024 when the approach began and to present date. All right, and again, congratulations to the public, the churches, whoever, whatever it's simple thing you're doing, it is because of your effort and your perception of feeling safe in the country is where we're at. So if we look at homicide in 2028, that's up until the September, the third quarter. In the final quarter, we only had 2 murders in October.
Sorry, you said 2028. You mean
2024, sorry.
Right, okay.
All right, we had 28 murders, and in comparison to 2 years, from the fourth quarter in 2024 to present day, we had 11 homicides, 8 which were gun related. All right, and if you look at the 2 years, 2024, third quarter and back, and 2023, we had almost, I think it was 58 homicides. All right, and you look 2 years later, there's a big difference because the approach would have started in 2024. Again, if you look at COVID, and look at when it started to when the approach started to fight back with COVID, the numbers continue to dwindle. It's the same. There's any infectious disease, you would always get that results. There won't be any if and buts about it because you find the root cause. Once you find what is causing it, it's like you have a leak in your house and the flow keep wetting. Now you check the pipe to do this, you can't see nothing. The plumber come, what he does, he busts the wall. That's the root cause. It's coming through the pipe in the wall, right? And then the water stops. Same thing. You always find what is causing the problem, and then you start finding solution to it. He buys a T, he buys a U, he buys a L, whichever he needs, the plumber needs, and he fixes the problem. And that's what we do. But we're not buying any shapes. We're just applying finances and principles to it, and then that's how we get that. And then we look at, for me, the most important, interesting part of it, you look at number 7 is a time between events. So remember I said earlier that an event is a shooting. And in the past 2 years and beyond, we look at events like 12 days, 16 days, between 12 and 16 days. And then in the next 2 years, which is until present day, we look at 95 days to 120 days. That's a drastic change from teen to 90s. All right, that's almost what, 70 something days apart from before.
Well, if you're going to say 120, that's on the high side. That's
yeah, so the low side is 95 and the high side is 120 because we did not have a homicide from late October to April 2025, right?
Right.
So that's why we got the 120 dates. So that's the high side. The low side is 95. All right, so I'll come to something interesting. All right, so then this one is basically showing you where the event took place. And we have the red, orange looking one in between Sandy Point and Hertfordshire. That's last year where we had a number of shootings in Hertfordshire. And we call that a cluster, and that's why the color is different. Because the clustering, because it happened so often in one place, it became red. All right, and we had, I think it was 5 shootings in a week or 2. And so it clustered, and that's why we end up with that. So we recording where the events or the homicide or the shootings are taking place. And like I said, that the red one represents Hertfordshire. And just let me go to this quickly. This is important, this one. So this is a prediction model. So the prediction model basically is saying if within 95 days to 120 days, the likelihood of a homicide is possible. And so we're not saying that we want people to get murdered within that period, but based on the trends of the past homicides within when the approach started, we recognize that within this period we could predict the trend. In prediction of the trend, we recognize that we were 110 days between for the last homicide. When we did this trend in November, right, we got 110 days, and the homicide took place on the 27th of December 2025. All right, so that was the last one within that period. And now we have one which was unfortunately little boy on the 2nd of January. So now we're still going to maintain our low and our high time between event. Unless it changes drastically within the year, then we're keeping it so far. And so since then and now, we're close to the 90-day. All right, so I just wanted the public again to realize that this is not any make-up story. It is literal science. All right, the architect, which is myself, I took time out and I followed the trend just like science. And there you go. You look at the trend again. All right, that's the trend. You look at the highs and the lows. And that's how we're able to come up with these numbers.
And you know what's awesome to Ian is that even sometimes before he gives presentation, persons who fully understand the concept of what we are trying to get across, you would hear them mention something that is coming on the next slide. So that means it is actually working, because if they understand the concept and they can relate, then they say, well, maybe, or how come this? Then bam, we have the evidence to show. So it's not anything that is made up, because they understand, and if we can provide that factual information, that means it is working, and that means the science is real. So it's nothing that is made up.
And seeing it on
and we are seeing,
and
correct.
And you feel it in the community. I think that Mr. Richards, you had a slide here, as you speak about persons and the buy-in and being able to share that information that indicated the 76% was also how they feel. You can put that up now, if you can find that, how they feel about crime in their community currently here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Or the perception of feeling safe. That's what they did. We deal with the perception. So first, the question was, do you think that the public health approach is working? And 76% of the persons would have said yes. All right. And then we asked how much persons would you be interested in prevention programs? All right, and interventions, and 89% of persons said yes, sure, why not?
Sure, why not?
All right, and then the most important thing was the perception of how people feel, and we had 41 believe that the decrease, there was a perception of a decrease. But what was interesting, if you look at perceived increase, you see 30% feel like crime has increased in their area. Why? Because maybe they're in a high-risk area, and it was not, we did not get to that area yet, or maybe when you look at social media, we see a lot of fighting, especially in school fighting, both male and female, even though it's more on the female side than the male side. And so the concept of youth violence, you see they specified, what exactly they were referring to as they speak that perceived increase. They said it's concerns about youth violence, property crime reported, and media influence on perception. And I want you to look at, if you look at the property crime report, all right? The listening audience, I want you to remember this one now. If you go to the police, minor crime, if you look at the bottom, malicious damage, it correlates with what I just said, property damage. And in speaking with the National Security Council, the commissioner would have said, yes, Hance, it's not necessarily that it's a lot of people. Sometimes it's one person going around and doing and performing the malicious damage.
But for the benefit of our radio audience, if you could just call out the figures there.
So the figures are 70, it was at 72 and it's now at 86. But that's the only minor crime and even major crime that's on the up. And that's why a person said in the perception in their area they felt they did not feel like the perception of feeling safe, because in the area they probably would have suffered malicious property damage. All right, so that's the only one, and it like I said, it correlates with that of the police report. So it's, again, that's science. I could have had something wrong and then there's no correlation to it, whether you could have both positive and negative correlation, but in this case the number must match the other number. Right. So if I'm saying, if the public is saying one thing and the police is saying something else, then there's a problem, but both entities are saying the same thing. All right, and that's the only crime that is basically was on the increase within that period.
And if I may add too, because I want to speak about the police, for example, you know, and it shows that it really takes a holistic approach. Everyone come on board, because with the Secretariat itself going into the communities, you know, getting this information, when we ask certain questions, and as you can see, the police are heavily doing their community engagement, and when we ask about that, they appreciate the fact that they are seeing the police now visible. So it also puts them in a position where they can also report whatever simple crimes and stuff like that. So I also want to say kudos to the police force also, because again, with partnership, collaboration with the various ministries across the board, it is definitely a good look for us to bring crime and violence to a minimum.
Proactive interventions, which one could also term as prevention as well.
Yes,
so
yes.
Talk to us a bit about that.
I'm happy you asked the question. Again, Mr. Producer, if we could go back to the slides. These are very interesting and painful slides. Every time I present, I tell people it's interesting but painful, because you look at the staggering numbers for a community of St. Kitts and Nevis, so small, of 50,000 people. All right, so we look at a total of 484 males only within the past generation. And then you have about 150 something, 56 if I'm not mistaken, who are incarcerated. It doesn't necessarily have to be now, but between that same period in question.
And that would be 1996.
Yes, right down to recent, to 2024.
Right.
And then you look at those who are incapacitated, we're looking at something like 15, give and take, all right? Because you'll always have your outliers, right? And if you add that, you're almost at 700. Mr. Richard, 700 in a generation. So in a presentation in Washington Archibald Bassett High School and Virtuous High School, I asked them, I said to the parents, if you take out all the boys out of those 3 schools, imagine what's going to happen to the Federation in the next couple of right away, actually. And that's what we lost already. So the fight is about not losing that number again in the generation to come. And because I said I'm happy you asked the question, because if you look at April, let's look at April to September, the numbers are also staggering. Now let me explain why. So the prevention period, remember I said we find a root cause, and from the statistics from USAID, we recognize in the conversation, if you read the research in its entirety and in depth, you realize that the recruitment period is within April and September, because the children home. You have Easter break and then you have summer. Yes. So you have about 10, if you put the two of them together, you have about 10, 11 weeks of idle time. And so we recognize that this is the period that is most sensitive to the as it relates to the intervention or fighting crime as a public health issue. So we're now working on a program where we could now try and fight and reduce the recruitment period. So last year we started the approach. Now this year we're trying to contain it. So we're trying to contain the murder rate. And so we're trying to now find out how we could have children diverting their deviancy into something positive within that period. So within, I think it will be June, July, August, or late June into end of August, maybe the third week in August. So we're coming up with an intervention program where I think it's 2,500 plus children within St. Kitts and Nevis, because I went to all the schools. I literally got all the figures from 3rd form to 5th form, and then that of CFBC. So no one is left out. And so we're putting them and we're trying to get them involved, everyone within that age group, and listen carefully within that age group. Now the younger age group, they already have their vacation Bible school, and they have their camps here and there, but a camp is not long enough to suffice or to fight against the 11 weeks that we have. So we need a longer period. So we're looking at job training, volunteer work, being a part of another program, maybe work at the police station, maybe work at ZIZ. Not work, but job training, because of the age, internship, that's the word, yes. And so we're looking at those things right now again to try and reduce the likelihood of being recruited. And once you do that, then obviously, then the numbers, we're hoping that the homicide numbers continue to drop and the time between events continue to expand. And so that's what we're working on also at this time.
For the benefit of our radio audience, I just want to quote the figure. If you could put back on the screen, from 1996 to 2024, the total, and this is males that you mentioned.
Yes.
And of course that would be...
There are a few females, but not significant as it relates to the male.
You're talking about 484 persons. 484 lives lost.
Between the average age of 16 and 25.
All who would have been in the productive stage in terms of being able to work and support and contribute to social security.
Future leaders and make contributions.
How many children were left without? And so this approach that you mentioned, because even as you speak about establishing the root causes, being able to identify when persons are likely to be susceptible to joining a gang, again, that is where the science comes in. You recognize that it's over most of the time this summer period. As you said, children are not, most of them, they're here, they're doing nothing, there's a school. And as you mentioned, the camps might be just for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. They have all of that idle time where persons can use to take advantage and sell their message and get them involved in antisocial activities. So by doing that, you are snipping the spiral, you're interrupting it.
That's interrupting the transmission.
The day of interruption, I always like that term. You're interrupting the transmission of violence, which is very important in terms of interrupting the spread of diseases. Very important as well too. All right, is there anything else? And you touched on it, Mr. Richards. Let me come back to it in terms of children and copying, because social media plays a very large role in the lives of these young children. Very concerning if you're a parent or you have a guardian or you have young relatives, and we see how social media can really influence persons. And looking at the television right now, there's so much violence on television. There's so much violence. Speak to us a bit about copying and how we can influence young children.
Please, I would definitely also love him to share that slide with the child mimicking.
Okay, so let me go, Mr. Producer, can you just go to the slide for me? Before I go to that question, I just wanted to demonstrate something to the public again. That's very important. Maybe if you look at the screen, you see the year. All right, it's a little wide. Maybe if you could just kind of squeeze it in. Perfect, producer. So if you look from January to March, you see heightened tourism season and highly visibility of the security forces. The same thing between October, November, and December. Now, why? So we decided, we recognize, like I said, the issue in terms of recruitment, and so we split the year in 3 pieces. 2 of the 3 in mainly high responsibilities placed on law enforcement and the Justice Department, and the other piece, which is a larger piece, that's where National Secretariat for Human Security and Wellbeing comes in, and that's where we focus on interrupting and interventing and having intervention programs and community engagement within that period because that's, like I said earlier, that's a period for possibility, the likelihood of, and the high risk period for recruitment is within that period. So again, I wanted to show the general public that is a lot of science behind it, and not just as we say in saying it's talk and something like that, talk and cheese or whatever, I don't know. So yeah, it's not that, it's real, it's actually real work, all right? So imagine, because I'm actually taking my time out to actually study as much of the issue as possible to see how we could best reduce the chances or the likelihood of children being recruited. Again, if you have a problem with it, that's fine, but if you don't have a problem with it, that's you. But I have a problem with losing another 700. At soon and soon we don't have no man in St. Kitts, and no, the Prime Minister already made a bullion call for reproduction. We can't afford to lose another 7. And I think that is also part of the issue, because we would have lost so many young men within that period. The chances, or the likelihood of having a greater population obviously has been diminished because of the loss of so many young men. And so I just wanted to share to the public that that's how we're looking at the year. Not saying that the law enforcement is not doing their job during that period, but the greater task is placed on us within that split April to September. All right, so, okay, Mr. Producer, I have to take it down so I could put up the slide Ms. Carey was referring to. So as it relates to social media, that's a very difficult question to answer, because there's so much rules and regulations that is involved, and you don't want to have this communist view of, or this dictatorial view of deciding what children can and cannot look at. And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I heard the Prime Minister made mention of some plans they have where that is concerned, to which end I am not certain. So I can't necessarily speak to that. What I could recommend is let's wait until he comes up with his plan and idea, because that's a more complicated view, aspect to deal with from a scientific point of view. Where I find the problem, I always go and find the problem. I can guarantee I'll find the problem. I mean, and then I guarantee I'll find the answer as well. But I just need to study it some more and see what influences the children more from social media, and then I'll find the solution. I promise you. Hopefully next time I come, I'll have the answer for you. So finally, the slide, Mr. Producer, that Mr. Carey was referring to is basically just saying high exposure and low exposure. So you have low exposure you have low exposure to crime and violence. You basically have this. All right, so that's low exposure, very little happening, so very little response. Now, if you have high exposure and if you're in a high-risk area, respectfully, McKnight, Newtown, Sandy Point, Keon, those are the areas that the children made mention of in their responses to the USAID, not me. But obviously, I'm a soldier, so I know also. But I'm saying the high exposure, if you look at the high exposure now, what happens in high exposure is this is what you get.
Yeah.
Children, the gangs, the high exposure will produce gangs. So the greater the risk in the communities, the likelihood of more children forming gangs. All right, and so I think she wanted me to show that. And then I think more so also this one where we start with, this is how the community, this is how the spread takes place in crime and violence, from one event to the next, to the next, to the next. There's a bit of anime to it, so let me make it quickly. So that's one event leads to a next, and then that's another shooter, and then we have another shooter who gets involved, another shooter, so we have more events. And we get more gang members forming, so 1 will bring 2, 2 will bring 4. You see that's the gang culture developing. Right. And then what happened to this 3, they bring what? 2, that's 3, 7, basically 15, if I'm not mistaken, close to that 13, and then another. That's 3 persons bring 26 members in a new gang. That's a period between April and September, and that's where the recruitment period is. And then and then it goes it gets bigger at the end of it, because nobody really saying nothing. We're not fighting back, and so the gang has more leeway to go and recruit more persons. And like I said earlier, we don't necessarily look at crime and violence as a health issue, and it's one also the reason why we had so much retaliation, because people are still traumatized by the events. So yeah, that's basically.
So the period is quickly approaching when this would take place. How close are you to developing the strategies, the interventions that really can be rolled out, and how soon can we expect to see that?
Well, currently we are still in the process of it. We are looking at having a firm framework, at least by the next meeting we should be concrete, and we meet every other Thursday. However, if we have this event that is coming up, we meet more periodically to ensure that everything is set. So by the next meeting, we'll be concrete as to when we're going to have the actual date of the next initiative coming up.
And during that time period, I would love to have you back sometime there so that we can promote it and help persons to understand why it's important for persons to take part. So we're basically out of time, but quickly I will just give you an opportunity to speak to the community in terms of whatever type of support is needed. How can they get involved? What can they do to help to keep St. Kitts and Nevis a safe place to live, work, and play?
If I was to put it into one word, I'll just say partnership. You know, build partnership. We are open to opinions, suggestions, feedback, whatever it is. To get in contact with us, currently we are going by 664-6002. Or you can send us an email at citizensecurity@gov.kn. However, because we are making the change over into the new name, we're still using that. So for now, or you can visit the Prime Minister's office and ask whatever questions, leave information there. Okay. But really and truly, we want persons to partner with us, share the ideas, each one touch one. Again, it's a holistic approach. I can't do it alone, you can't do it alone. We have to come together if we want realistic solution. And we're not looking at way down the road. We want some possible solution that we can now use now and turn that into a framework. And of course, when execution period comes, we are concrete with that information. I was given another number, 667-7257. That's 667-7257. If you want to get in contact with the Secretariat itself, you can reach that number. I don't know if my colleague have anything else to add.
Anything?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to once again say how grateful I am, with lots of gratitude to the community for supporting the research. Again, if it's not supported by the community, nothing is going to work. I'm also calling on the stakeholders and the organizations and the business person, the NGOs, to help support the children where possible. So when we make calls to them and we come and see them, if they could come on board and assist them, because we really want to take care of our future. Because I mean, we don't want to have an aging population. So we need to take care of what we have now, so that in the future, you and I, we have people to look after us, and not we just on the side of the road because we don't have any proper caretaking going on, because there's no one to do that for us. So we have to take care of our youth. So I'm just asking the community to continue to support the children and support the interventions that are coming on board, so that we could definitely target our children and just basically divert the deviancy into a more productive direction. That's basically what I wanted to say. And thanks again to the community. I can't stop saying that because they're really helpful. I must say that Nevis is big on board, especially most of the stats you see, it's done by the statistician from Nevis, and she's always on target, checking and make sure everything is in place. The schools, the principals, they're also very helpful, the government side. So I'm just saying that community, in general, the community has been, both islands have been very helpful, and I'm grateful.
Right, okay. Hance, Richards, thank you very much for being in our program. And Ms. Carey, thank you as well for joining, and certainly, as you mentioned, we would love to have you back sometime sooner rather than later. I'm thinking sometime in the summer.
Yes,
once we can arrange that, we'll come back and share more information.
Share the data of from the intervention.
Right, absolutely. All right, and so we'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition of InFocus. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place, at the same time. Remember, it's InFocus, it's your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.